I'm Haley.
Hi, I'm Marissa.
And I'm Ryan. Today we'll be talking about the social and political issues of the 1920s.
Okay, I'm going to start out with a case about a murder about two young boys named Leopold and Loeb. They were 18 and 19. It started in 1924, and Richard Loeb was an 8-year-old boy who had this fantasy of like killing people. He read into like crimes and killings and detective stories, and he finally came up with the idea of committing the perfect crime. And before this, he did petty little theft charges and stuff like that. And him and Leopold finally came up with this plan of kidnapping a boy and holding him for ransom. This really wealthy 14-year-old student, and they spent 7 months of planning the murder. And on Wednesday, May 21st, 1924, they ended up kidnapping this 14-year-old boy named Bobby, threw him in the back of the seat. Leopold was in the back with him, and Loeb was driving the car. It said that Leopold took a chisel, hit him upside the head, put a sock in his mouth, and he soon died after that. After they killed him, they went down to a river and put his body on the side of the river, poured hydrochloric acid on his body to remove all the evidence and identification. It was said that Leopold left his glasses on the side of the body, and a guy named Tony Minnick found the body, found the glasses, and it was said that only 3 people bought the glasses in the whole city. So they narrowed it down to Leopold and Loeb. They confessed that he lost the glasses while bird watching, but they obviously didn't believe him. And later on, they found him guilty and were sentenced life in prison with 99 more years because of kidnapping. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, the spread of fundamentalism in the 1920s began in very small areas, and fundamentalists were very skeptical and almost afraid of the scientific theories of evolution. They resented it because they wanted everyone to believe in the Bible and not that theory of evolution. And when state laws began to forbid teaching evolution, people started to react to that, and in the result, people were reacting from that. There was a trial. It was called the Scopes trial, also known as the monkey trial. It was about a high school teacher, a biology teacher named John Scopes, and he was charged with illegally teaching the theory of evolution. One of his arguments in the trial was that he was just simply teaching out of the biology book that the state approved of. The law summoned John to go to the Fred Robinson's drugstore for the trial because the city was so small and it was in Dayton. The opening trial approached in July, and since the town was so small, it was a big deal that such a big thing was going on. There was banners everywhere. People brought in monkeys to dance on the street. There was lemonade stands. It was just crazy. And over 10,000 people showed up to watch the trial. And after a couple weeks, the jury found that he was guilty of illegally teaching the theory of evolution, and that it could be appealed by the Supreme Court. And I think a month later, his Scopes head defense person that was representing him was overeating and he died. So, but yeah, he was found guilty.
Nice.
Okay, well, I have 2 cases. I have the Sacco and what was it? Vanzetti case, and I have the Plessy versus Ferguson. I'm going to start with the Sacco and Vanzetti case because the Plessy versus Ferguson is a way more in-depth and longer case. But the Sacco and Vanzetti case is about 2 Italian immigrants who were convicted or accused of murdering a young man, and
I think it was 2 young men.
two young men?
Yeah, 2 robbers.
Yep, murdering 2 men during, okay, they were accused of murdering 2 men during a robbery that they did. They robbed for a few years before that, but in this one, the 2 men were murdered, and then they were the only ones around. They were the ones who robbed, so they were obviously the main suspects for murdering. This case started a worldwide protest because they were actually convicted of murdering the 2 men and were executed in 1927 on August 23rd. Also,
What the heck?
For real.
Anyways, when I tell how to unpack it, I'll tell how to unpack it.
Okay, hold on. Sorry. We have Queen Bee on the other
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. But there were a bunch of protests everywhere worldwide. It didn't just have to do in the town that the murders took place in, because everyone thought that the government chose them as guilty because they were immigrants and they were a different race. So that sparked different controversy with different races. Families didn't agree with the government. The government was they thought the government was being dishonest with them and racially biased. But yeah, they were found guilty, and no one really knows if they're actually guilty or innocent, but to me it seems like they were just found guilty because of their race, and also they were immigrants.
From their past.
Right.
Yeah.
They were just like, okay, just forget it, they're
Right.
guilty.
Yeah.
Right.
So now I'm going to go on to Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson is about a guy named Homer Plessy. He was arrested on June 7th in 1892. And this was all part of a plan of the Citizens Committee. In 1890, they had a plan to try to go against the Separate Cars Act, which the Separate Cars Act is blacks and whites cannot be in the same cars together, and there's certain cars that are designated to whites, and there's certain cars that are designated to blacks. And they wanted to see if they wanted to test if this act was constitutional or not, because they thought it went against the 13th and 14th Amendment. Albion Torgy was the legal representative for Homer Plessy because he was a part of the Citizens Committee. The decision in 1896 was that the Separate Car Act is not unconstitutional. They thought it was all constitutional. They thought it was within their rights to make people separate but equal. And that's what they did in 1896. They made everyone separate but equal, which is that blacks and whites had to be separated, but they all will have the equal rights and will all live under the same laws as whites. Also, a guy named Henry Billings Brown is the one who is on the defense team, so he's the one who made it so that blacks and whites are going to be kept apart for decades. And also in 1952, Plessy versus Ferguson was overturned by the case Brown versus the Board of Education. And now Homer Plessy died already, but this is mostly about how this one case of a different race trying to show the government wrong can impact years and years, because in 1920 they still had racial issues.
And even right now, in our time, we still have
And
racial issues.
everyone will look back on this Plessy versus Ferguson case to show that apparently everyone is politically equal, but they aren't socially equal,
Right.
which is not right at all.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously it's not right at all. And, I was gonna say something else. Oh, and I wanted to read a quote out of this. The majority decision in Plessy v. Ferguson served as the organizing legal justification for racial segregation for over 50 years, which that quote means a lot because
50 years later, there's still
50 years later, blacks and whites are still have problems,
Right.
and we always will. I think so.
It's not right at all, though. I'm not with that.
It's not right, but that's just how it's gonna be with people because people have different beliefs.
All right. Well, I'm Haley.
I'm Marissa.
And I'm Mariah.
And we up this gym.